Okay, so welcome to video B of AUI 4863 tutorial orientation for the 2024 academic year. So as I was explaining, the essence behind the business cycles, as I had mentioned earlier, you find a lot of these essay-based questions being centralized on that in this particular module. So your understanding on the blueprint of these principles is important. Very, very important. So one of the things I would do, especially in the official group, I would explain in details to say when they ask you to identify a weakness, for instance, what do they mean? So I have notes where I'm explaining about, for instance, a weakness. Let me just open that so that I can show that to you. So just give me a second to do that. Same thing is true with regards to risks, audit objectives. Okay, for the audit objectives, risks, some of those notes, even the lecturer also provides that to you guys on my uni. So if you check properly, you'll find that. I think the same thing is true with the procedures. If you go under additional resources, like I remember when I was doing this, they provided some of that details to us on the platform. So you can also make use of that. It's very much value adding. Some of my notes are similar to that. Some of them slightly different, but still meaning one in the same thing. So I want to show you just some of the typical notes when it comes to weaknesses. When it comes to writing weaknesses. Because, and I'm showing this simply because of the question I'm going to deal with today in the assignment 4. So these are my notes when it comes to writing weaknesses. And this is on the basis of the standard blueprint, how they want you to prescribe or drafting your weakness statements. Guys, there are certain terminologies that they expect to see in your weakness statements. And that's what I normally attribute to as auditing language. So in your weakness statement, there are two things. A weakness, normally, it's identified under two conditions. And I'm not saying that it's only limited to this, because sometimes weaknesses just go beyond just identifying missing controls and evaluating the existing controls. But under normal circumstances, on the basis of experience and the basis of how I was taught, this is what one of the things that I concluded on the basis of weakness statements. Normally, when you're asked to identify weaknesses, there are two conditions you're looking for in the system description. Number one condition, it's a condition where you are looking for existing controls. So this was just supposed to be vice versa, okay? But either way, it's still fine. I can do them either way to say, when I go through a case study scenario, when they're asking for weaknesses, I can maybe look for missing controls first. Then I can then look for existing controls which are simply inadequate or not achieving the set objectives. So when you're talking of such type of controls, they can be regarded to be poor or inadequate. I'm talking of existing controls which are not achieving the objectives. So let's put it in a more systematic fashion. When you are asked to identify weaknesses, number one thing you're looking for, as you go through the case study scenario, you want to identify the controls which are existing in that organization. And what you want to look for as you are evaluating the existing controls, you want to determine whether the controls are achieving their task. If the answer is no, that means it's a weakness. Let me repeat that. When you go through that case study scenario and they are asking you to identify a weakness statement, okay? I mean, a weakness in the system. What you're looking for, especially from a perspective of existing controls, the first thing you do, you look for the controls which are there. You evaluate those controls to determine whether they are achieving the desired objective. If the answer is no, it means that particular control is a weakness, which is not achieving the task that it's supposed to be intended for. That's one way of identifying a weakness. Of course, there's a way they want you to write that. Number two, after you've gone through the scenario and identified the existing inadequate controls, The next step you do is you go through again the system description the third time now. What you're looking for is based on what they are doing, because you understand that, yes, we are dealing with a cycle, and a cycle, it's a systematic process. So talking, for instance, of revenue and receipt cycle, it has got stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. So as you go through the system description, you are able to pick up, okay, based on what I've read in paragraph 1 or paragraph 2, what particular stage in the revenue and receipt cycle are we dealing with? Could it be processing of customer orders? Could it be granting of credit? Could it be sales recording? Could it be, receiving of payments from the customer? Anything of that sort. So you need to be able to pick up what is happening in the scenario. So if it is, for instance, processing of customer orders, right? You have identified the controls that they already have in place, and you have determined whether or not they are achieving the task, meaning to say you have identified existing inadequate controls, number one. Number two now is you're going through that function again, all right, which is maybe say processing of customer orders. You are now looking to identify controls which are missing, but which are supposed to be existing according to the blueprint. What do I mean? According to what is prescribed in your study material. So I'm now taking you to your source references, which is your textbooks, your study guide, and all that. Talking of revenue and receipt cycle, just as a typical example, all right, if you go, for instance, under that first stage, which is processing of customer orders, it gives you a description of what is supposed to be taking place. What type of controls should be in place? What type of documents and records should be used? What type of personalities, individuals that are supposed to be, or departments that are supposed to participate in that particular stage of the cycle, right? It gives you that description. If you go through your textbook, right? It gives you that description. Now, when you look at that description, that's what I'm referring to as the blueprint, and you align it to what is going on in the case study, you will be able to tell, okay, but based on what these people are doing and what I know to be the blueprint, this control was supposed to be there, but it's not being affected. Guess what? The moment you pinpoint something like that, that's a weakness again. But in the context of what? Of a missing control. Are we together, guys? Now, from that perspective, there's a way that they want you to frame your weakness statements. There's a way that they want you to state your weakness statements. So as a typical guidance, and I'm not saying you should always follow it in that way or in that order, when you write, for instance, a weakness statement pertaining to missing controls, you can use terminology or word phrases such as there is lack of, and then you specify the control that is not in place or the missing control. All right. Another way of writing a missing control, you can say there's no authorization, for example, or there's no segregation of duty, for example. There's lack of segregation of duty. There's no safeguarding of assets. There's no rotation of duties and all of that, right? All those are just typical examples, just denoting that, look, these are missing controls. So these are the weaknesses I'm picking up, right? Or you can say there's non-existing and you specify the non-existing control, right? In the context where it's an evaluation of existing controls which are not achieving the task, here's how they want you to frame words that they look for. They want you to indicate that the control in place is poor. So you can say there's poor authorization, there's poor rotation of duty, there's poor I don't know, document design, for example, right? But it just does not have to end in you saying there's poor segregation of duty. Why are you saying there's poor segregation of duty? Why are you saying there's inadequate segregation of duty? So your weakness statement does not just end in you just saying, oh, there's lack of independent checks or no segregation of duty. You now need to become very specific, and that's where marks come from. And let me show you something that makes students lose marks, especially when it comes to these things, because they look simple, yes, but they are very also strict when they're marking you guys in the context of your exam, in the context of your assignments. It's very easy to lose marks in as much as this thing can be looking seemingly easy, but it's also very easy to lose marks and fail. So when you're drafting your weakness statement, you also need to ensure that you are very specific in terms of detail. So if you say there's inadequate safeguarding of assets, give us a reason based on the evidence in the scenario which suggests that there's no safeguarding of assets. So you can say there's no safeguarding of assets in place since they do not have any form of CCTV cameras in place. There's no security personnel monitoring the entry and exit point to the warehouse section, something like that. What have I done? I've specified why there's no safeguarding of assets. Do you understand, guys? Am I making sense to you?
Makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Yes.
So you need to get really specific, and getting really specific, you also explain some detail that you are finding in the scenario, case study scenario that you would have been provided with, right? So for example, if I say there's inadequate safeguarding of assets, which assets are you referring to? Like, that's where you need to get specific. So it could be inadequate safeguarding of stock, which is inventory. Stock where? In the storeroom. Why? As the door is always unlocked. So it means there's no one that is monitoring control, you know, in certain instances, something like that. So you have to be very precise, okay? Be specific, something with there's no authorization controls. You need to specify no authorization controls for what? Is it no authorization of controls for credit sale? Is it no authorization controls of employees, master files? Is there no authorization controls in place with regards to amendments made to the payroll? You need to be very specific, right? Now, that was just to give you just a synoptic, you know, teaching in when I'm teaching notes themselves, all right? Explaining some of those examinable items. So this is what we do. We give you the details that is essential to get you to, you know, to be capacitated to answer the questions the right way. Now, taking you back to the presentation, I'll come back to the question. So that was just to explain some value in terms of aspects they will test in these topics. Now, I want to touch a bit about the assignments. So there are 4 assignments. 2 of them, they are multiple choice based assignments. And then the other 2, they are essay based assignment. It doesn't really matter the order, but normally assignment 1, it's multiple choice based. That's what I picked up. It's normally about 20 questions. At the time when I did this module, it was 20 questions. I'm not sure if they've changed now in this 2024 academic year, but I'm pretty sure it's still the same situation. So it's usually, there are 2 quizzes, right? Multiple choice questions, and then the other 2, there will be more or less something like this. I mean, say it's an essay-based assignment question, right? In terms of our tutorial services, guys, this is what we offer. So we provide tutorial classes, and our tutorial classes are done online, such as the setup that we have currently. So we do online classes with you guys. And in the online classes, what we do explain, we explain the content, which is the assumed knowledge, what you need to know according to the blueprint, which is your prescribed study materials, and also the applicability, the application of that assumed knowledge from your prescribed material. That's where now questions, either from past assignments, questions either from past examination papers, that's where they become handy. So I do show you that during the context of a class. We also provide assignment guideline. We don't do assignments for you, but we provide assignment guideline. Now, meaning to say, I give you a guideline, but you have to do your own work. And I'm saying this for a reason, because when it comes to essay-based assignments in particular, you will discover that it's possible that if you copy and paste what I give you, all right, but I have to do the actual answering of the questions, yes, then I'll explain to you, okay, how did I answer it in that way, right? But that is just to give you a guideline, but not to say copy that and paste it in your solution. No, you have to then follow that as a guide to do your own work. I'm saying this because at honors level, postgraduate level, they're strict when it comes to plagiarism. So you cannot afford not to do your work, especially when it comes to essay-based assignments. I can never overemphasize on that, but it's important to ensure that you are actively involved, especially with the assignments, guys. It's very, 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 very important. Maybe with auditing, they're not as extremely strict, but I've noticed, for instance, with MNG, RSK, they are extremely strict with those ones. Trust me, I've done those modules myself. I know what I'm talking about. They are very extremely strict. So you need to make sure that even when the tutor gives you guideline with assignments, you use that to do your own work. Okay. Then of course we have what we call exam preparation boot camps, commonly known as marathon classes, exam packs, preparatory notes. Now that is an exam preparation package that we offer towards exam period to equip you guys for your final exam, to get you fit for the examination. Then of course there's consultations, research guideline. This is more applicable to research-based type of modules like MNG. Okay. Right. So that's what makes up our tutorial services package. Then I want to get to the part where we want to deal with the application of the assumed knowledge. But I know I may not have taught you on some of these things, which I'm going to deal with in the context of the question. But I'll try to cover maybe a few things on it, and then we can see how far we can cover. Because I know the question is a bit longer, right? But nonetheless, here is the deal. So this is assignment 4 from the 2022 academic year. Please let us go there. I've shared the question in the group with you. So please, if you can open it, I would appreciate. There's some materials that I'm just gonna close here for the interest of the presentation. So let us go to assignment 4 of that 2022 academic year. So this is the assignment that I did myself, and then I presented it to the group in the class at that time. Now, let me take you through the question so that you can see what is happening there. So in question 1, the required section is always your point of departure, or what I call the starting point. Whenever it comes to essay-based questions, this is always your starting point. So in the first question, 1.1, they say explain internal control objectives of validity, accuracy, and completeness in the context of sales in the revenue and receipt cycle. So in other words, what they're asking for in this, they're simply asking for you to describe like internal control objectives of validity when it comes to sales, internal control objective statements when it comes to accuracy. But for this one, it's a theory question, so it's not more of an application question as such. So hence you notice that I've given reference to the study guide, which is on page 105. I'm going to open that study guide again. I think I closed it. But nonetheless, this is the description. All right. That is given on page 205 of your prescribed study guide. So validity, guys, it simply means that okay. So with validity, if something is to be valid, it means it's not fictitious. It means it's accurate, it's relevant, it's not a non-existing item from a general point of view. So, but in the context of validity of sales transaction, here is the deal. So it is to ensure that recorded transactions have actually occurred and they are supported by sufficient documentation and audit evidence. Such evidence could be in the form of specific manual authorization, required for overriding the system, for example. That is if in the context where we are dealing with a computerized environment, right? So essentially that is to explain what makes a transaction valid. A sales transaction for that matter. It can only be valid if it has actually occurred with supporting documentation. Accuracy, that is to ensure that all the sales transactions are recorded with mathematical accuracy in terms of the revenue amount, as well as the details that have been captured. So if a transaction is to be accurate, it is accurate in terms of not only the mathematical accuracy, that is if there are figures involved, but also in terms of the detail, the correctness of the details that have been recorded. That's what makes something to be accurate. Completeness. Sales transactions can be considered complete. That is if all the transactions that are recorded and that there are no omissions of such transactions in the sales records. So completeness is achieved if all the sales transactions of the organization for a particular period have actually been recorded without any omissions of essential transactions that have taken place. That's how completeness is achieved. Now, you do not have to explain too much because mark allocations should be used as guideline in terms of how much quantity, in terms of what you need to write, should you give, okay? So in this context, because it was just 3 marks, that's why you notice here, I had to give it in this manner. And I give you guys a source reference, page 205 of that study guide. So I'm gonna give you the study guide in the WhatsApp group. You can go and trace this and you'll see the details there. So like I said, this was a theory question, not so much of an application, but the application side of it is here. Question 1.2, where they ask you to identify as well as to explain the weaknesses in internal control in the aspects of TAP Pty Limited SWOT, revenue and receipt cycle, which are described in points 1 to 6 above. Notice, do not concern yourself with back orders. Quite interesting. Notice this question is worth 24 marks. And these 24 marks, they are coming from identifying weaknesses from point 1 to point 6 as per the given system description. Now, let's have a look at the system description and begin to evaluate for those weaknesses. Now, we are told you are a member of the team on the audit of TAP Pty Limited, a company which supplies plumbing requisites, such as baths, basins, pipes, joints, etc. So this company is supplying such materials. Notice they are not producing these items, which tells me something. It means this is more of a retail entity. Why? Because they are buying a finished product for resale. Some of those things should be ringing bells in your mind just as you read a scenario to say, okay, so no wonder they're telling me there's a revenue and receipt cycle that is being applied. Okay. Anyways, now you have been assigned, but the same thing is true even in the manufacturing sector. They also do apply revenue and receipt. So now you've been assigned to the audit of the revenue and receipt cycle. And in the process of evaluating the accounting system and related internal controls in the cycle, information pertaining to certain aspects of the cycle appears below. Guys, every paragraph should have meaningful value, and you must be able to identify the meaningful value that is given there. When you just read this first paragraph, what is that attributable to? Is it a problem area or it's simply background information that you see there? That's my question to you. It's a question, guys. That's background information. Why? Because based on that information that I've read, they're simply telling us what is the name of the organization in question, what is that organization doing, and what are you expected to do as you evaluate this entity. That's all that we are told in this paragraph. But the problem areas, it's starting from point 1 all the way up to point number 6. That's why you notice there's something like P5, something like P4, something like P2, P1, P3. What are those things? These are simply to attribute to problem areas. A problem area, guys, in a system description, when I do my analysis, and I do this even for any assignment question that we can deal with, or even any past exam paper that we may be discussing as I equip you for exam purposes. I do this to help you, to direct you what you need to do when you get an essay-based question, whether it's in an assignment setup or whether you're in an exam situation, especially exam situation. How do you approach this kind of a question? Because you need to be able to have a strategy that is effective and that helps you to save time. So now, if I look at the point number 1 there, they're saying the company sells only on what? On credit, right? This reduces the risk arising from having cash on the premises. Now, my question to you, do you think there's a weakness there? Remember, a weakness, it's either you're looking for what? Missing controls, or existing controls just not achieving tasks. So if you're only selling on credit, what about customers that prefer buying goods for cash? What about them? What do you guys think? Okay, I'll leave that to your thinking. Is it okay? Let's go to the second bullet point, but think about what I've just said now. They're saying they only sell on credit, right? So my question to them, just as a part of what I will call my food for thoughts, all right? If you sell on credit only, number one, you are highly likely going to increase the risk of credit losses because it's not every one of the customers that you would sell to that can be able to afford to repay the company. So I'm just thinking out loud here. That's number one. So I want you to think about that. Number two, I also want you to think of the fact that, okay, what about customers who prefer buying these things for cash? So it means now you're going to lose revenue then if you're not selling by other methods of payment in this context, okay? So I want you to think about that. It will then be able to help you to identify a weakness in their sales function. So there's something wrong with that process of selling on credit only. So it's inadequate. So their sales function, yes, it's existing because they are selling. There's a method that they have in place of selling products to their customers, which is credit sales. It's existing. So that's more of a procedure in that case. But is that effective enough to achieve objectives concerning generation of revenue for the company? The answer is no, it's not adequate enough. Why? Because the company is losing revenue since they cannot cater for other customers, preferring to make purchases on cash basis. You need to think about that as well. So guys, why am I saying these things? I'm saying these things because in essay-based questions, you need to think a little bit out of the box. This is honors level. They expect you to do that. You need to question things. Why are they saying this in the context of a case study? What does this imply at the end of the day? Basing, of course, on what they are asking in the case study scenario, the required section. Number two, all sales are made from Pty Limited's premises, which consists of a showroom, warehouse, and administrative offices under one roof. Now, when I look at that, I'm thinking that's something to do with their organizational structure. Everything is under one roof. We have a problem there. We have to talk about it. So it has to do with their organizational structure. You have to talk something about the organizational structure here. Let me show it to you. There is inadequate organizational structure. Why? As the sales function, right, is not separate from the warehouse function. It's not separate from the showroom. It's not separate from the administrative offices. If you go to your blueprint, the revenue and receipt cycle itself, which I'm going to teach you anyways as a part of a recap, all right? One of the things you notice, they will tell you that the sales function should be separate from the warehouse, should be separate from any other department. It has to be independent, okay? Especially independent of the warehouse, right? But now if all of these things are under one roof, we have a problem. And again, there is no proper access controls within the facility at Limited. Why? As the showroom, the warehouse, and the administrative offices are not separate from each other. Now, the showroom, that is where the actual items are, you know. It has to be monitored. If it's not monitored, somebody can just steal and it goes unnoticed. I don't know if I'm making sense to you guys.
Yes, yeah.
Right. Again, so besides these weaknesses that I've just explained, there's no physical safeguarding of stock at the warehouse, as there is no security personnel in place or CCTV cameras deployed. There's nothing of like a form of a physical security measure that they've put in place just to, you know, to govern or to safeguard, sorry, not govern, but to safeguard their stock. I mean, we're not told anything about that. So to me, when I see it not being mentioned, guess what it means? That's a missing control. And the missing control attributes to a weakness in this context. Am I making sense?
Yes, yeah.
Wonderful. Now let's continue. Plumbing contractors Now, notice they've already finished telling us about the organizational structure, which then makes valid sense concerning some of the weaknesses that I've identified there, because they never mentioned anything about, okay, so is there any access controls in place since all of these things are in one roof? How do you separate these divisions, you know, to be independent of each other? There's nothing mentioned about it. So guess what? If they don't say anything about it and it's applicable to the case, that will be attributable to as missing controls, and that's a weakness statement. Now, number 3, plumbing contractors must visit the company's premises to make purchases as TEP Pty Limited does not deliver. This suits the contractors as it means they can make their purchases early in the day. The company's business hours are from 7 to 5 p.m. and collect the goods at the at the same time. Right. Let me repeat it again. Plumbing contractors must visit the company's premises to what? To make purchases, right? As the company does not deliver. Now, I'm thinking to myself, what if you've got someone that wants to order outside of the country and they want you as a company to provide them with shipment? So if you don't allow them to ship, you are losing revenue because you're not catering for that. See. Anyways, now this suits the contractors, and besides companies or contractors outside of the country, think about because this company, obviously, they have got their offices at a particular location. But what about contractors that are not within that location or domicile, but they want to purchase from you guys and expect these people to be there physically? So that tells me they don't have options where someone can procure these goods online. Think about it. So they're not optimizing on other avenues of making sales. You see? Right. But anyways, not just only limiting it to that, here are some of the weaknesses that I have picked up. Right. Number 1, it appears that there's non-existing control measures set in place, right, to ensure that all the deliveries are made. To ensure that all the deliveries made are invoiced and properly accounted for. Because if you don't deliver, then how do you know that whatever that is being, loaded to the delivery trucks for the consumers, those goods that are being loaded, they are actually invoiced? How do you know if you are not involved in that process? So it appears to me that they have nothing to do with monitoring deliveries of goods from the company premises to their customers. So that's that's a non-existing control. Number 2. Okay, sorry. Number 2, no delivery procedures in place to ensure that goods are dispatched to customers at designated time frame to avoid. Okay, I'm receiving pop-up messages. It's distracting me now. Sorry about that. So now another weakness: no delivery procedures in place to ensure that goods are dispatched to customers at designated time frame to avoid inventory backlog at the dispatch section. Remember, deliveries ought to be done at specific times. Of course, it can be daily, but it has to be done at specific times so that it does not interfere, for instance, if there's stock counts that are taking place, right? Or if there's any new new goods that we are receiving from the supplier. We need to ensure that there is no deliveries taking place during that time. But in this case, they are not having anything to monitor that. Okay. Number 4, I may not finish everything, guys, but what am I trying to show you? I'm just trying to show you how you can identify weaknesses. And I want you to notice from almost all these weakness statements that I've been giving you so far, okay? From all the weakness statements that I've been giving you, I am stipulating that something is not there. Meaning to say there's no supervision over the sales function, for example, no isolation of responsibility, or if a control is existing, I stipulate whether it's achieving the task or not. In this case, I identified that there was no, so there's inadequate logical access controls, all right? But let me just read it so that you can make sense of this. This is for number 4. Customers or contractors are served by any one of the 6 technically trained salesmen who sit behind a long counter in the sales area. Right. Each salesman has his own computer terminal. I want you to pay attention. They're saying they're served by what? Anyone, which is fine. When a contractor arrives at the counter, one of the sales men will inquire as to the contractor's name and having access the create sales invoice module will enter the given name, create sales invoice. But what about sales? Have you evaluated whether this person is creditworthy? I'm not seeing that being stated. That's just me thinking out loud. Because when I read something, I need to look for, okay, what controls do they have? Are those things achieving the task? Yes or no? If they are not, then I think about, okay, what other controls are supposed to be there, which are not there? That's missing controls. That should be your thinking as you're looking at questions on weaknesses, okay? Then this brings up the customer details on the screen, which is formatted as sales invoice. So they're already going to the invoice without evaluating creditworthiness of a customer. Anyway, the salesman will then confirm the details in terms of account number, address with the customer by reading the details off the screen to the customer. Right. So here are the weaknesses which I was reading to you. Okay. No supervision over the sales function. Why? As any of the salesmen can perform the function. There is no isolation of responsibility there. Inadequate logical access, no limited access to the computer modules. I mean, they cannot just have full access to the sales system, okay? Why? They can manipulate information, right? That's where fraudulent activity begins to penetrate. But if they are separated, I'm talking of the level of access into the system. If it is, limited to certain individuals based on their functionalities, that way you can evade fraudulent activity. There's also poor ordering processes. Why? Because there's inadequate verification of customer details. It's not just supposed to be based on the name of the customer.